Hello, and welcome back to the Palma Pioneer Pantry. My name is Marin, for those of you that are new, and today we are going to be canning some meat. We probably won't actually get to the canning today because this process always takes me longer than I think it will, but we are going to prep some beef that I bought the other day at the store to can it up. Beef was on sale for less than $4 a pound. And so I bought 2 roasts, and we are a family of 2 adults and a baby. And so we cannot eat even one of these as an actual roast before it goes bad. But beef roast cut up into pieces is the best meat that I have found for canning beef chunks. And then you can use those chunks to make stews, or I've used it to make beef stroganoff. I mean, you can shred it and use it as shredded beef, all kinds of things. And it's shelf stable, which is really important because we don't have a very big freezer. And, well, we do have a very big freezer, but it's not big enough to store the amount of meat that we would need for a year. And it's also dependent on electricity, which occasionally the electricity goes out, and if the electricity goes out, I don't want to open that freezer, but I'd still like to be able to have meat for dinner. I mean, assuming the electricity is out for more than a day, which we live in town, so it's not likely. It just feels like the smart thing to do, to have some shelf-stable meat. It's also really nice because then I don't have to remember to thaw the meat, which if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I'm terrible at remembering to thaw the meat for dinner. So we're going to can this up. I will probably save half of our second roast whole and just freeze it to use as a roast. But we will see how many jars this fills. So I am actually going to do this a little bit at a time because I think it's going to be easier. My knives really need to be sharpened, and I made an appointment, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'm really looking forward to them being sharpened, and in the meantime I'm going to be really, really careful. So I'm going to show you. This meat has a fairly thick piece of fat along the bottom, and while you don't want to have that in your meat, especially when you're canning it, because it can cause problems with your seal, you do want to save that fat because you can render it to make beef tallow. And I've never done that before, but I have been saving beef fat from what I pull off of tacos that I make, when I make ground beef for tacos or for sloppy joes or anything, I drain off the fat and I save that in the freezer. And then there have been a couple other times that I've canned beef like this, and I save the fat that I pull off from that. And so if you're interested in seeing me attempt to render tallow for the first time, leave me a comment below and subscribe, and we will get to that video. The more people who tell me they're interested, the sooner we'll get to that video. So I'm just going to cut the fat off here so we don't have to do it with each individual piece. And you can see there's little pieces left, and that's okay. A little bit of fat is not going to hurt your seal. It's just if you have a ton of fat in there. And then I have these quart jars. I used to can all of my meat in pints, and then I started actually cooking with it, and I prefer to do, even though there's only 2 of us eating, and a baby, but he's starting to eat solid foods, I still like to use 2 full pints when I make my meals, because then we have leftovers either for lunch or for another meal, and so I've decided I'm just going to start canning it all in quarts. There's still a little bit of fat here that I'm going to cut off. Anyway, so I've decided I'm gonna can all of my meat in quarts going forward. Okay. So what you do is you just chunk it up into, approximately the same size pieces, and I usually try to do pieces that are about the size that I would want in a mouthful of stew. Maybe a little bit bigger because they will get a little bit smaller as they cook. And you fill up the jar. This is called raw packing. You can do a hot pack method, but that requires you to cook the meat, I think it's like 75%, and I am just not confident in my ability to cook meat to a certain doneness, but not all the way done. Like, I feel like I'm just gonna either cook it too much and then it won't get hot enough when you can it, or I won't cook it enough and then it won't cook all the way. So I just raw pack my meat. And it's also easier because you don't have to cook it first and takes less time, which for me is always a good thing. So it looks like, based on, usually I can get about a pound of meat per pint. So I'm expecting to get about 2 pounds of meat per quart. But I'm not sure exactly how many pounds of actual meat were on these roasts. But just based on volume, I think we're probably going to get at least 7 jars, so at least 1 canner load from these 2 roasts, which will be nice. I don't know if there's enough fat in that chunk I don't know if there's enough fat in that chunk to pull out. I'm trying to remember to talk loud enough that you guys can hear my musings. We are still working on getting a microphone for me, but it just hasn't been top priority with our budget at the moment. So, and we don't want to just get a cheap microphone and then need a better microphone later. So Jose is doing the research on that, and eventually we will get one. And then I don't have to feel like I'm shouting anytime I do a video like this where the camera's not right next to my face. And I do pack the meat in just a little bit, not a ton, because you never know how much liquid the meat is going to release. But I do pack it in just a little bit because I feel like every time I do this, the headspace gets bigger, and there's never enough liquid to cover the meat all the way, which is fine. You don't need that. I want to get as much meat in each jar as possible for when I'm cooking. And so I try to fill them up as full as I can while still maintaining, I think you're supposed to have 1.25 inches of headspace when you're canning meat. I'm actually really excited about how much fat was on this, because I think I finally have enough fat to justify rendering some fat, and I've been looking forward to trying that. Okay, I think we're going to call that good for that jar. I also wanted to ask if there are any videos that you guys would like me to do. The Pantry challenge will be ending soon, and after that we're not planning to share dinners of the week every week. We will still share dinners of the week, but probably not every week. And so I need more projects to film and show you guys. And I want to know what you're interested in, because I want to learn everything. And so I figure I can start with learning the things that you're most interested in seeing and go from there. This would be a lot easier with a sharp knife. But it's going okay, and I'm just being extra careful. So please leave me a comment on something that you'd be interested in seeing. And I think I'm going to let you guys go here. I will show you the finished jars. My vacuum is running in the background, if you can hear that. So I'm going to finish filling up these jars, and then I'll show you the jars. And I also have some chicken to process, and I will process that in exactly the same way. And then we'll see kind of what time it is and if we have time to do a canner load tonight or not. So, thank you for being here with me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. So I grossly overestimated the amount of meat that I thought I was going to get. I got 3 quart jars, and then this half of the roast, if you can see, the fat is really well marbled throughout, which makes for a really good roast, but not so great for canning meat. So we are going to wrap this one, actually I'll use my vacuum sealer and seal that up and use it as just a roast. And we'll just can these 3 quart jars of beef. And I'm hoping that I will be able to get 4 quart jars of chicken. If not, I guess I'll learn how to can beans, because I have some dried beans that I bought recently, and if I have an empty quart jar, I will figure out how to can those as well. So I'll see you again once I get started on the chicken. Okay, so I got all set up for the chicken and just started it, but I decided I should show you the chicken. So chicken has much less fat than beef. I do still try to cut off any big chunks, but it's not as big of a deal. I also cut chicken into larger pieces because chicken tends to shred more than beef when you use it after you've canned it. So I'll go as big as my palm even sometimes. Oh, that's a big chunk of fat, gotta get rid of that. So I'm going to get the rest of this chicken cut up and put into jars. I am only going to fill 7 jars total, so we got 3 jars of beef. I'll only do up to 4 jars of chicken because I only want to run 1 canner tomorrow, and I'm not going to have time to do one tonight. So I will see you tomorrow when we start processing these in the pressure canner. So I almost forgot that I didn't just buy a couple of roasts because beef was on sale. I also bought 15 pounds of ground beef because it was on sale. This is a 5-pound bag of ground beef, and I bought 3 of them. One of them I put whole into the freezer for when I do kind of a bulk cooking, or when we have lots of guests over for tacos or sloppy joes. But the other 2, the other one's still in the fridge, I am going to repackage into 1-pound packages, and I'm going to use my vacuum sealer. The downside to vacuum sealing is that with moist foods, or foods with any moisture to them, like ground beef, it's really hard to get a good full vacuum, like completely get all the oxygen out, and it's also really hard to get a good seal. And so something that was recommended to me that I'm going to try this time is to portion it out into your little bags and then freeze it and then vacuum seal it. So today I'm going to be portioning it out And then tomorrow, while the canner's running, I'm going to vacuum seal it. So let's get started. You can buy pre-made and sized bags. I'm cheap, and the person who gifted this to me, my wonderful mother, gave me a bunch of rolls of bags because they're way less expensive, and you can just make the bags the size that you want them to be. Now I am going to package this beef into 1 pound packages, so I am probably going to, let's see, I'm trying to think about the size that a normal just 1 pound thing of beef is, because you need 4 inches plus whatever food you're going to do. And so I'm thinking, there's little marks on here, so I'm thinking I'm going to do approximately 3 marks for each bag. And I know that I need 5 bags, so I'm just going to cut them all at once. And then in order to make them actually a bag, you turn on the vacuum sealer and you stick one end of the bag into the sealer and you press the seal button because there's an open end of the bag, so it's not going to be able to vacuum anything out. And then you just wait and it heats it up and seals one end of it. And then you know it's done and you pull it out. And you can see that that is sealed. So I'm going to make those bags and then I will be right back. So I've got my bags made and my beef open, and I am just going to, and I'm not too worried about it, so you could put the bag on here and then tear it so that it goes down to 0, but it's telling me it's 0.1 ounce, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to open up the bag and try to grab some of this beef. I'm sure there's a cleaner way to do this without having to just like totally dig into the beef with your bare hands, or I guess I could wear gloves, but it's just for our family and it's going to be deep frozen and then cooked, so I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to just grab this out, put it in the bag. I'm gonna kind of test as I go to try to get as close to 1 pound of beef as possible. And since I'm gonna freeze this first, it's not going to squish as much when the vacuum sealer does its job. So I am trying to really pack it in there fairly tightly so that it's easier for the vacuum sealer to get more air out. Okay, note to self, when using your kitchen scale, always have it flat on the hard surface, or it won't give you the correct reading. Okay, close enough. So I'm just going to get these bags finished up, and then I will probably need to do the other package after Junior goes to bed. And tomorrow, when we get ready to run our canner and can up the chunks of beef and the chicken, I will show you what these look like coming out of the freezer and how to seal them with the vacuum sealer. So I've got all of my bags filled up, and I'm going to take each bag and kind of squish it, because like I said before, I'm going to freeze these before I vacuum seal them. So I don't want there to be air pockets stuck inside the beef, if possible. Obviously, this won't be perfect, but I'm just going to squish them and then roll them. And I don't feel comfortable just sticking them open into the freezer, so I did grab a couple of reusable gallon-sized bags that I'm going to put them in. Just going to try and get all the air out of the beef itself that I can. And then I just kind of roll the top around beef to keep it closed. Slide it in there. Glad I grabbed 2 Ziploc bags because this is not all going to fit in one. I think it might have been better if I had tried to do these in like square shapes because I think it would thaw faster when I'm ready to use it, but I didn't think of that. Maybe we'll try it with these 2. I'm not sure if I made the bags big enough actually. First we're going to squish it together and then we'll squish it flat. And then I think I need to look up some YouTube videos and see if I can find out how like butchers package their beef, because I know some butchers package their ground beef in like flat square packages like this, and I'd be interested to know how they do that. Like, I mean, if they have some kind of machine that does it, I'm not going to be able to purchase that for myself, but if they just have a good solid technique that would be nice to know. However, we are planning to go in with friends to buy half a cow, so we would end up with a quarter of a cow, and the ground beef will come packaged in whatever size we want, so I won't have to worry about splitting ground beef for a while, but it still would be interesting to discover. Okay, so I have my jars here. They've been in the fridge overnight. I've got my canner out on the stove. I'll show you that in a minute. Last night I didn't have any clean lids upstairs, so I brought up some new lids, and we're just going to take the rings and the lids off, and then I have some vinegar here. I will wipe down the rims just to make sure there's nothing that might prevent a seal from forming. This one's funny, it doesn't have any markings on it, which I usually mark my lids, but the pop is not there, and then there's like a dent on it, so that's a few of the ways you can tell if your lid is used if you don't mark your lids. Well, and I reuse my lids a lot, and so sometimes they get washed and the markings wash off, so it's just nice to know. Okay, that lid's probably been used. Okay. There's that. Sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. She's got zoomies. Gonna just get a little bit on this cloth. And you can do this with water if you want to. Because it's been sitting overnight, I am going to use vinegar just so that any fat that might have hardened will come off easily. Just wipe each rim. This is also a good time to make sure there aren't any chips in your rims. That's another thing that can stop a seal from forming. Okay, so that's good. And I feel like I'm missing a jar because I thought I had 7 jars. There's only 6 jars right here, so I'm going to have to check the refrigerator. And these process for 90 minutes in the pressure canner, and so I'm not worried about washing my lids or boiling them or anything, because there's definitely going to be enough heat to sterilize them and to cause to soften up the compound. This compound that forms the seal, so it should be fine. I'm gonna check. I did have 7 jars. I just missed one. Take that off. wipe the rim. Pull out one more lid. Okay, and then when you're putting your rings on, you want to put them on just fingertip tight. So I'm not cranking with my hand, just fingertip tight. And I do hold the jar because I feel like if you're just putting it on with your fingertip like this, it just starts to spin too fast. So I do hold the jar. Not sure if that's right or not. And these jars are, as I said, cold from the fridge. So I will be putting them into just room temperature water in the canner and heating it fairly slowly. So let me take you over there and show you that. So I've got 2 or 3 inches of water in here, and then my canner fits 7 quarts. So I've got the quarts in there. And then I'm going to take the lid. Put it on, and then, like I said, cold jars, room temperature water, and then I'm going to turn my burner on. Mine goes from low to high, and high appears to be the number 9. So, yeah, so I'm putting it on 3. So that kind of tells you where I'm putting it, and I'll leave it there until the outside of the canner starts to feel warm, and then I will heat it, turn it up so that it will heat and get up to pressure faster, because I tried leaving it just on low for a really long time and it literally took like 8 hours to start steaming, which I just don't have time for. So yeah, I will come back to you when this is hot and this little vent right here starts to steam and tell you what happens next. So I'm not sure if you can hear the steam. I often have a hard time hearing it or seeing it, and so I like to put a canning lid up here, and you can see that it's a nice steady stream of steam. And what you're going to want to do is set a timer for 10 minutes and let it vent for at least 10 minutes. Okay, so my timer just went off, and this little doohickey will sometimes pop up and sometimes not. On my canner, it almost always pops up. And so once your timer goes off, you know it's vented for long enough, so you want to put your weight on your little pipe. And then I like to turn my heat down a little bit so it just doesn't build up the pressure too quickly. And then you let it build the pressure. On a Presto pressure canner, usually you are using your dial gauge to keep track of your pressure, but in order to do that safely, you have to get your lid and your gauge tested every year, and I have not made time to do that this year, so I will be using my weight as a jiggler. And the weight that comes with the Presto canner is just 15 pounds, so it starts to jiggle at 15 pounds of pressure, and I'll show you what that looks like when it happens, and then I will also tell you what we do next. So I usually actually try to do this closer to 10 pounds of pressure, but I got distracted. So when it gets up close to pressure, I like to turn it down to the temperature that I usually kind of maintain my pressure at. And for me, I found that to be a 3. And then I just watch it pretty carefully until that little weight starts jiggling, and when it does, I set my timer, and for meat, it's quarts of meat, it's 90 minutes. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it's jiggling, and you want to just kind of adjust your temperature to maintain kind of this amount of jiggle. Sometimes you have to turn it down a little bit so that it doesn't jiggle too fast. Just make sure that it doesn't stop jiggling, because if it stops jiggling, you have to start your timer over. So I am going to set my timer for 90 minutes. And we'll see you when the canner's done. Okay, So we've got the canner going in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. And in the meantime, we are going to, I guess I don't actually need to have that open because I've already done my bags. So we're going to turn on the machine. I have the meat that I froze overnight. And it's a little bit frustrating because there's already some ice that did form despite it only being in there for one night, and I don't know if that's freezer burn or, I mean, I don't think it's freezer burn, I think it's just ice, but I don't know if that's going to cause freezer burn. I guess we'll find out, and if it does, then I will have to figure out some other way to do this. But you take your bags, and since there is ice in here, no, I think I'm going to try it on the dry setting since it's pre-frozen and see how that works. Well, it worked pretty well, just like I thought. It didn't obviously squish the meat at all, but it did get all the air out of like the corners where I wasn't able to get the meat all the way into the corner. So that's promising. I do think that the next time I do this, I'm going to try only freezing it for a couple of hours so it's not completely solid, and maybe that will also prevent these ice crystals from forming, and we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to get the rest of these vacuum sealed up and put them, well, I need to label them with the date and put them back in the freezer. And then I will be back with you when our canner is done and ready to be taken off the heat. So when your timer goes off, don't touch anything on your canner. Turn the heat off on your burner, and if you can, move the canner to a different part of your stove where it's not on the heat. Now, I just slid the canner across my stove. I have an induction cooktop. You are not supposed to slide your canner, but I can't lift it one-handed, and I have a hard time lifting it even with two hands, so I slide it. And that's just how I do it. And my little man needs some attention, so I will come back to you after the pressure has gone all the way back down to 0. So once your pressure has dropped to 0 and this little pop-up has dropped down, you can take the weight off your canner. And I like to, after I take the weight off, kind of untwist the lid, but then leave it for another 5 minutes or so, just to make sure that it's cooled a little bit, that it's not going to have tons of steam pop out. And I will take the lid off with both hands and show you the jars in the canner after that. Okay. So now I'm going to grab these jars out, and I just realized I only grabbed my regular mouth jar lifters. So this is going to be interesting getting the wide mouth jars out of here. I'm so excited. Oh, that's not too bad. Okay. And I always like to have a towel or something down on whichever counter I'm going to be setting my jars on. Try to leave a couple of inches of space in between the jars so that they can continue to cool. This cooling process right after you take them out of the canner is actually what allows them to seal, because the pressure inside the jar changes so quickly that the lid sucks down and seals. It looks like we definitely had some siphoning because these 3 chicken jars at the front are not bubbling, and these 2 beef jars at the back are also not bubbling, which doesn't necessarily mean that they won't seal, but in my experience it makes it less likely. If I kind of mess with the ring a little bit, you can also tell the rings are loose. I'm not going to touch the lid because that can give you a false seal. And having the rings be loose like that also sometimes indicates to me that there was a problem with the seal. But I will update you before I go to bed tonight on whether they look like they're going to seal. You do want to let them sit for at least 12 hours. So I'll check them in the morning, and whatever hasn't sealed I'll put in the refrigerator to either use right away or freeze. Good morning, everyone. It is not quite 6 o'clock, and I need to leave to catch the bus for work, but I almost forgot to update you, and we might have to do a voiceover because I'm whispering because it's early in the morning, but I almost forgot to update you on these cans, so we're just going to check really quickly to see if they sealed. So that one did not seal. That one did. That one did not. That one did not, but it kind of did a false seal as I pressed on it, so we need to set it aside so I remember. That one did not. So I must have done something wrong. Maybe I heated it too fast. Sometimes heating things too fast causes siphoning, but I'm going to stick all of this in the fridge. We'll use some of it this week because I did plan to have beef stroganoff, so we can use the beef in that. And we will try again next time we have meat to can. So.